Stay tuned for insightful book discussions from around the globe. Hi, everyone. This is Sally's Book Club. Today, we're exploring the book Orientalism, a 370,000 word work divided into 3 chapters. First published before the Cold War, it's been translated into 36 languages and remains a classic in cultural studies. You know how Hollywood shows often include Chinese elements that feel off to actual Chinese viewers? Like in Sherlock, modern detective story, but the Chinese gangs look straight out of Ming Dynasty? Or in The Martian, China's space tech saves NASA, but the scientists dress like it's 1980? So why does this happen? After hearing Orientalism, you'll understand why Western media keeps recycling these Chinese stereotypes. Before diving in, let's meet the author, Edward Said. His name itself embodies contradiction. Why is that? Said is an Arabic surname meaning descendant of the Prophet. Born in Jerusalem to Arab parents, yet given the posh English name Edward. So the name itself blends East and West. His contradictions deepen. Non-Muslim Palestinian activist who broke with Arafat over Oslo Accords, educated in elite Western institutions, but instead of embracing Western ideals, he exposed its dark underbelly, becoming a leading critic. His sharpest critique, the book we're discussing, Orientalism. First, let's define the Orient, the East, as constructed in opposition to the West. Said argues that East and West aren't mere geographical concepts, nor eternal truths. They emerged with modern imperial colonialism. For clarity, let's define Western Europe, Christian areas as West, and regions east of Arab civilization as East. In this book, the West primarily refers to British, French, and American empires. Their East meant territories targeted for colonization. Said rejects this binary definition. His book critiques it fundamentally. We'll unpack this later. That explains the East concept. So what's Orientalism? Since Napoleon's Egypt invasion, Western colonizers developed Orientalism as study of the East, superficially analyzing Asian or African history, languages, arts, but actually constructing colonial narratives, like misquoting reality, creating fictional colonial perspective. This framework enabled Western control and civilizing missions. Now let's explore Syed's arguments through 3 key thinkers. First, why did the West universally choose East as the other? Why make East perpetual target? Second, how was Eastern identity constructed? How did Western stigmatization and labeling occur? Why did East-West binary dominate? Third, why do these stereotypes persist? What dangers do they pose today? These questions represent 3 foundational thinkers. Building on their theories, Said developed Orientalism. First, Jacques Lacan, controversial post-24 psychoanalyst. His theories are notoriously complex. Said draws from Lacan's self-other duality. The self is straightforward. The other? That's like a mirror for the self. We define ourselves through contrast, like knowing yourself by how you differ from colleagues like Xiaozhang or Wang. Said transplanted this concept to geopolitics. He saw Europe as an individual meeting an other. The East became its mirror. First question, why choose the East as this other? Simple answer, the East posed existential threats. Geographically adjacent, it was the West's richest, oldest colonial prize. Less the Christian-Islamic rivalry spanning millennia. Before Americas or Oceania discoveries, civilizations clustered in Eurasia. Christian West, Orthodox buffer zone, then Islamic, Buddhist, or Confucian East. A formidable civilization demanding conquest. Africa lacked comparable power. No southern concept emerged. With the other established, differentiation begins. The West needed to prove fundamental difference from the East. This othering process mirrors universal human behavior, like China's ancient Huayi distinction, central kingdom versus barbarians, positioning oneself as civilized center, others as periphery. But Western Orientalism was systematic and potent. Said documents how British, French, American empires obsessively constructed essential East-West differences. They claim the West is rational while the East irrational, chaste versus decadent, mature versus childish, concluding Western superiority and Eastern backwardness. Why assign virtues to themselves and vices to others? Such systematic othering is historically rare. Let's compare with Chinese civilization. Though calling ourselves the Middle Kingdom, ancient Chinese imagined the West romantically, like the mystical queen mother of the West or Buddhist Pure Land. Unlike Western Oriental depictions, no progressive adjectives ever attached to the East. This roots in Christianity's foundational worldview. Haven't you noticed? Angels versus devils, light versus dark, absolute moral binaries. This rigid dualism framed East-West as moral opposites, not neutral counterparts. Crucially, Orientalism erases diversity within the East itself. The East contains multitudes. Chinese differ from Arabs, Indians from Japanese. But Orientalism lumps Semites, Muslims, Jews, Chinese, Indians into sameness, portrayed as stagnant peoples wallowing in despotism and indulgence. And all Easterners reduced to abstract concepts under the Oriental label. So the first question, why target the East? Said answers via Lacan. The East represented existential threat and conquest target. By constructing monolithic Eastern identity, the West defined its own through opposition. Now, the second core issue, how is this Eastern image constructed? Why did East-West duality dominate? For this, Said introduces another French thinker, Michel Foucault. Compared to Lacan, Foucault shines as the brightest academic star of past half-century. Foucault's most famous concept, discourse theory. What's discourse theory? Simply put, terms like class struggle, globalization, environmentalism need power structures to gain traction. Class struggle became mainstream only after proletariat gained power. Globalization emerged as capitalists sought expanded profits through collaboration. But once established, discourses reinforce and even become power itself. Environmentalism empowers global conservation organizations, for example. Thus, environmentalism itself wields power. Understanding this helps grasp Orientalism as discourse. Orientalism is political discourse shaped by power dynamics. Western powers collectively built this discourse. Politics, military, science, arts, all involved. Thus, Orientalism became massive academic discipline, all serving single purpose, justifying Eastern colonization. Classic example, Oriental women in Western literature, perpetually lustful, foolish, self-sacrificing. Like Flaubert's Egyptian courtesans sleeping indiscriminately. Machine-like character without voice or emotions. Western protagonists speak for her, mirroring East-West power dynamics. West controls narrative while East remains silent, other. Similarly, Oriental women in films blend sensuality with childish innocence. Take Madame Butterfly, Cho-Cho-san marries U.S. Officer Pinkerton, only to be abandoned. The film emphasizes her geisha identity and naive personality. Ultimately, Cho-Cho-san commits suicide to escape her fate. These Oriental women symbolize fertility and sexuality, embodying patriarchal ideology. Colonialism and patriarchy mutually reinforce each other. Love and sex become metaphors for Western domination over East. Let's summarize the second point. Power, constructed Orientalism. This power encompasses politics, military, even literature and arts. By weakening Eastern image through discourse, imperialism justified colonization. Though colonial era ended, Oriental stereotypes persist in modern media. Why? What dangers does this pose? Now to our third question. This requires introducing our final thinker, Antonio Gramsci, communist leader who developed cultural theory while imprisoned. His most famous concept, cultural hegemony, Set applies this theory in Orientalism. What's cultural hegemony? First, Gramsci distinguishes civil society from political society. Civil society, schools, families, voluntary associations. Political society, state apparatus, military, police, courts. Political society enforces control through coercion, but some control operates indirectly, yet effectively. certain cultural forms dominate others through implicit power, like political correctness in America. Legally, free speech exists, but racist remarks face social condemnation. Political correctness operates as unwritten rule. Compliance ensures social safety. Gramsci termed this dominant cultural force cultural hegemony. Said argues Orientalism persists through centuries via cultural hegemony. Though alternative views exist, some see East-West equivalence or Eastern superiority, they never mainstream. Why? Because Orientalism as cultural hegemony serves Western interests best. This cultural framework sustains Western dominance. Orientalism's academic shifts reveal imperialist motives. Orientalism emerged alongside Napoleon's North African conquests. 19th century focus shifted to India and biblical lands. Britain's crown jewel colony. Post-WWI, America dominated Oriental Studies. U.S. universities established Far Eastern departments, reflecting East Asia's growing geopolitical significance. Said observes America replicating British or French colonial patterns, extending through Gulf states, Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Afghanistan. Each empire claims exceptionalism, civilizing missions justifying force. Analyzed Pentagon advisors, South China Sea rhetoric. Same old tropes legitimizing American hegemony. Crucially important issue remains. Western cultural hegemony globalized Orientalism's influence into Eastern self-perception. This expansion manifests in two forms. Said warned about Arab publications filled with self-analyses of Arab psyche and Islamic myths becoming appendages of American academia. So China mirrors this. Many embrace East-West dichotomy, even white male, Asian female tropes. Critics note John Yamu's The Flowers of War replicates Orientalist narratives. Acadia terms this self-Orientalism. The second form emerged post-side. Eastern powers now construct others using Orientalist logic. A cognitive colonization of Sivaiwaze. Some see this in Wolf Warrior II's portrayal of Africa, geographically ambiguous setting, blending Somali pirates, West African viruses, North African conflicts, creating stereotypical Africa, war, plague, poverty, mirroring Orientalist depictions of Asia in Western cinema. Geographic illiteracy, Hong Kong indistinguishable from Beijing, Taj Mahal adjacent to Ganges. Chinese characters assume savior roles akin to Western protagonists in Orientalist works. Thus, concluding, cultural hegemony sustains Orientalism as Western cognitive mainstream. Now this phenomenon has spread to the East itself. Let's recap Sad's core arguments in Orientalism. First, using Lacan's theory, the East represented threat and conquest target for Western identity formation. By constructing monolithic Eastern image, the West defined its own identity through contrast. Second, via Foucault, Western powers systematically constructed Orientalism to justify imperial expansion. Third, through Gramsci, cultural hegemony made Orientalism dominant Western worldview. This cultural colonization now infects Eastern self-perception. That concludes the book's main content. But Sad's true value transcends mere critique of Orientalism. His brilliance lies in exposing the danger of all essentialist labels. Whether East-West, African-American, Muslim, Christian, these artificial constructs erase individuality, fueling conflict when made primary identity. As humanist, Side condemned this dangerous practice. Effective mobilization through simplification must be resisted. Yet, reality would sadden him. Tribal mentalities now thrive globally under nationalism and fundamentalism. 21st century sees resurgent xenophobia, masked as patriotism and religious purity. Said died in 2003, his lifelong Palestinian advocacy still unfulfilled as conflicts intensify. Fortunately, his work endures. Let's conclude with Said's own words to end our journey. Humanism is our sole weapon against historical distortions and injustices, our final resistance. This concludes our discussion of Orientalism. Study notes available below. Until next time with another profound read.